And let's not forget the NI national insurance raid on the private sector that Rachel Reeves herself pointed out would destroy business. Schools making them even more elitist. Our pensioners risking their health with which Labour's own report suggested that 4,000 would die. I mean, they don't know whether they're coming or going. We are on the brink of World War, and frankly, not answering questions isn't good enough.
Remember when you believed in Keir Starmer's promises of a better Britain? When you trusted that Labour would bring the desperately needed change? Now, as taxes rise and hopes dwindle, you can't help but wonder, were we all deceived? Today, we uncover how that trust was betrayed. Through the eyes of a relentless reporter, we reveal how the $22 billion black hole narrative was constructed to manipulate fears and justify policies favouring the few, not the many. Picture this: Rachel Reeves, Labour's Chancellor, stands at the dispatch box, her expression grave. In her first budget speech, she delivers the shocking news of a $22 billion deficit inherited from the Tories. The chamber reacts with gasps, but soon, cracks in the story emerge. Economic experts question the timing and validity of this fiscal black hole, raising doubts about its origins. Is this revelation a strategic move to craft Labour's economic narrative, or is it just coincidence? As we dig deeper, the answers may surprise you.
There were no answers. They don't ever answer a flaming question. But one thing is for sure, Rachel Reeves' disastrous anti-business budget is worse than anything.
Weeks ago, from that dispatch box, the Minister for Rural Affairs said that he'd been congratulated by a farmer over the introduction of the inheritance tax.
The plausibility of the claim starts to crumble like a house of cards in a hurricane. Respected economists are weighing in, and their verdict is damning. They're not just questioning the numbers, they're questioning the very foundation of Labour's economic strategy. One expert highlights that the proposed rise in national insurance for employers could be a job killer, particularly for small businesses already teetering on the edge of profitability. As the dust settles, the initial public and market reactions are rolling in.
Rachel Reeves is a disaster, and Keir Starmer's leadership is shambolic. The poor Liz Truss is often blamed for. In my view, Rachel Reeves must go. The other day, I went to PMQs, that's Prime Minister's Questions, and I can see why they call it that, because it was just questions.
Let me tell you, they're not pretty. Voters who once placed their trust in Labour are now scratching their heads, wondering if they've been sold a bill of goods. The markets, always quick to sniff out uncertainty, are jittery. But here's the real question that's keeping political pundits up at night: what's the endgame here? Is this $22 billion bombshell a clever political manoeuvre to justify unpopular policies, or is it a genuine crisis that Labour's inadvertently stepped into?
Just yesterday, we had 10,000 farmers on Whitehall protesting against this madcap decision.
I mean, they don't know whether they're coming or going. We are on the brink of World War, and frankly, not answering questions isn't good enough.
So does the Deputy Prime Minister agree with me that this decision should be thrown in the trash can along with Rachel from account?
As the dust begins to settle on Labour's budget announcement, a chilling question emerges: what if the $22 billion deficit is built on a foundation of lies? One determined journalist is about to risk everything to follow the money trail, no matter where it leads. But in a world where truth is often the first casualty of politics, can she uncover the real story before it's too late? Meet Sarah Thompson, a seasoned financial reporter known for her sharp eye and unwavering commitment to the truth. When an anonymous source drops a bombshell about Labour's budget figures, Sarah's journalistic instincts kick into high gear. Despite her initial skepticism, she can't shake the feeling that something's off about this $22 billion black hole. As Sarah digs deeper, she quickly realizes this isn't going to be an easy story to crack. Government officials stonewall her at every turn, refusing to provide detailed breakdowns of the deficit calculations. Financial reports seem deliberately vague, with key figures conspicuously absent. It's as if someone's gone to great lengths to obscure the true picture of Britain's finances. Undeterred, Sarah employs every trick in her investigative arsenal. She pores over Office for Budget Responsibility reports, Treasury statements, and public expenditure reviews, searching for inconsistencies. She cross-references official claims against independent analyses and historical data, building a complex web of financial connections. As her investigation progresses, Sarah starts hearing whispers from within the corridors of power. Whistleblowers and government insiders, speaking on condition of anonymity, paint a disturbing picture. They suggest that certain budget figures may have been manipulated to present a more favourable view of the government's financial health.
They didn't answer that question, so there's no point playing the non-answer. That was Lee Anderson asking Angela Rayner a question from the horse's mouth itself. They even evade questions that you would think it would be their job to answer. Now, the Labour government haven't got a clue how you or I really live.
One source even claims the $22 billion black hole narrative was strategically timed to justify unpopular economic policies. But it's a seemingly innocuous discrepancy in a Treasury report that truly sets Sarah's alarm bells ringing. A footnote, easily overlooked by most, contradicts a key assumption underpinning the deficit calculations. As Sarah pulls on this thread, the entire narrative begins to unravel. The truth, when Sarah finally uncovers it, is explosive. The $22 billion deficit, it turns out, is a carefully constructed illusion. Through creative accounting and selective presentation of data, Labour has grossly exaggerated the financial challenge facing Britain. The real deficit, while still significant, is nowhere near the panic-inducing figure presented to the public. While the public reeled from Sarah's revelations, seasoned political observers noticed something curious. Why were certain MPs suddenly changing their tune on economic policy? The answer would expose a web of alliances and betrayals that even the most cynical pundits never saw coming.
Their Westminster bubble insulates them from the real world, and I suspect they thought that their stonking majority,
when our economic recovery is not yet established or secure, and only adds to the pressure on businesses,
enabled them to carte blanche do whatever they wanted without our consent, things many of which they did not mention in their manifesto.
As Keir Starmer entered the parliamentary chamber, you could cut the tension with a knife. Opposition leaders, armed with Sarah's damning report, were out for blood. The usual murmur of conversation was replaced by an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of papers as MPs prepared their attacks. Starmer's defensive strategy quickly became apparent. He dodged direct questions, pivoting to rehearsed talking points about Labour's commitment to fiscal responsibility. But his evasiveness only fueled the opposition's fury. The British people deserve answers, not spin, thundered one Conservative MP, her voice dripping with contempt. As the session wore on, it became clear that Starmer's justifications for the $22 billion claim were paper thin.
Which is why I suspect Rachel Reeves thought that she could get away with foisting this anti-business budget.
the decision to saddle employers and workers with the jobs tax takes money out of people's pockets.
Energy security with Ed Zero's nut zero, £22 billion energy policies, the same size as the supposed black.
He repeatedly cited unforeseen economic challenges and inherited financial mismanagement, but provided no concrete evidence to back up these claims. The more he spoke, the more it seemed like a desperate attempt to cover up a massive miscalculation, or worse, a deliberate deception. The political motivations behind the $22 billion figure were becoming painfully obvious. It was a convenient boogeyman designed to justify unpopular tax hikes and spending cuts. But now that the truth was out, that strategy was backfiring spectacularly. Reactions from across the political spectrum were swift and brutal. The Conservatives predictably called for Starmer's resignation, but even traditional Labour allies were distancing themselves.
Energy policies which make us all poorer, with the con that is carbon capture.
Despite all of their election promises to cut national insurance contributions, they're actually raising them.
Schools making them even more elitist. Our pensioners risking their health with which Labour's own report suggested that 4,000 would die.
Trade union leaders expressed deep concern over the budget's implications for workers, while left-wing MPs openly questioned the party's direction. As the controversy snowballed, political analysts began speculating about the long-term consequences for Labour's credibility. This could be the beginning of the end for Starmer's leadership, mused one commentator on BBC News. How can voters trust a party that's willing to manipulate financial data for political gain? The fallout from this debacle was reshaping political alliances in real time. Moderate Labour MPs were seen huddled in intense discussions with their Conservative counterparts, while grassroots Labour members took to social media to express their disillusionment. The once solid Labour coalition was fracturing before the public's eyes. As the dust settled on this explosive parliamentary session, one thing became clear: the implications of this controversy would extend far beyond a single budget. The very foundations of UK economic policy were now in question, and the aftershocks would be felt for years to come. And
This is why it is so worrying that at this crucial time, the Prime Minister and Chancellor concocted a new jobs tax.
And let's not forget the NI national insurance raid on the private sector that Rachel Reeves herself pointed out would destroy business.
while politicians traded barbs, the real victims of this deception began to emerge, and they weren't who you might expect. The ripple effects of Starmer's $22 billion claim were about to hit British businesses in ways that shocked even the most hardened economists. As the dust settled on the budget controversy, economic experts started sounding alarm bells about its impact on market confidence. Reports indicated the private sector had shrunk to its lowest point in 13 months, suggesting a troubling contraction in economic activity. This was no longer just a political scandal, it was threatening to derail the entire UK economy. The situation grew even more complex as conflicting economic projections emerged. Some analysts warned that the budget measures, particularly the rise in national insurance for employers, could lead to widespread job cuts and reduced hiring. Local shops and care homes, already operating on razor-thin profit margins, were particularly vulnerable. Others argued the government's approach was necessary to tackle long-term fiscal challenges, even if it caused short-term pain. As experts debated the potential long-term consequences, a chilling possibility loomed. If growth was stifled, the UK could face a prolonged period of economic stagnation. Historical examples painted a sobering picture. Fiscal mismanagement often led to reduced investor confidence, economic downturns, and a vicious cycle of declining revenues and growing deficits. The UK now teetered on the edge of a similar precipice. The coming weeks would prove critical in determining whether the nation could regain its economic footing or face years of financial turmoil. Amidst the uncertainty, one message from economic experts was clear: transparency and honesty in financial reporting were paramount. Rebuilding credibility was the first essential step toward recovery.